Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thanks to my honourable colleague from Fundy Royal for his great remarks. And he brought up so many relevant subjects that need to be considered when we consider the implementation of this budget. I couldn't help but in preparation for my remarks today, an old saying came back to me, and I think it bears relevance today. I don't know if many in this House and fellow members may have heard the expression, whatever you do, don't put the cart before the horse. And when it comes to this particular government's budget, I have to say this is a superior example of putting the cart before the horse. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is that we're investing tremendous amounts of taxpayer dollars into building an elaborate cart, expanding the cart, growing the cart, indeed, making the cart larger, making the cart have many compartments, increasing the storage and capacity of the cart, while at the same time totally and entirely neglecting the horse. Now let's bring that to terms that we can relate to. When we grow the size and scope of government, the cart, the deliverer of services, without ever prioritizing the needs of the horse, which is Canada's economy, that funds and fuels and hauls the cart of government from one objective to another, we've got something that has misplaced the priorities that should be at the top of any government's priority list. When the priority is growing the size and scope of government while neglecting the very thing that funds and fuels the government, you're going to have a problem. Absolutely. When for 10 years we've called out and criticized oil and gas and energy and agriculture and many sectors that have helped make Canada a truly amazing country, no wonder people are frustrated and think that we've got our priorities wrong or that this government has their priorities wrong. You cannot be ever expanding the load and the burden upon fewer and fewer taxpayers. You cannot neglect the sectors that produce the wealth to generate the programs that we rely upon and depend upon and continually grow that level of dependence without expanding and rapidly growing and prioritizing the things that fund and fuel the economy. I challenge the government to reprioritize, to look at the budget and say, maybe we've got some things out of order here. We're growing the burden on the taxpayer without growing the taxpayer base. We're growing the expectations upon future generations of Canadians without growing the economy that will be able to fuel the very mechanisms of government that they're expanding. So to kind of crystallize this, Madam Speaker, I want to talk quickly about a few categories. And of course, I always love alliterations, so I'm going to give a few F's for the pathway forward in Canada. F number one we want to talk about is making sure that we make food affordable again. It's hard to work to carry out obligations to provide for a family if you're struggling to put groceries on the table every week. And we've seen under this government that the cost of groceries has doubled in the last 10 years. We're seeing an expected increase of even $1,000 more per year coming in the next fiscal year on average Canadian households to put groceries on their table, to where they're expecting a family of four to cost $17,000 this year. It will go to over $18,000 next year to feed a family of four in Canada. For many families, that is looking like an insurmountable mountain that they must climb when they try and balance that with other needs in their households. But I must further go to the source of food and look at the increased burdens that this government has brought upon those, and that is our farmers. I have the privilege of serving on the Agriculture Committee, and trust me, we hear directly from our farmers and producers, and they talk about soaring input cost. We put our farmers at a competitive disadvantage when they have to pay things like industrial carbon tax, including fuel standards tax, and packaging taxes. All of these over-regulations and increased taxations are causing an undue burden on those who grow our food and generate food security for not only our country, but countries around the world. I think if you were to hear the voices of farmers who say, if you want to find a pathway forward, take care of those who grow your food. Take care of your farmers and make sure we get out of their way so they can do what they do best, and that is plant and grow and produce good nourishment for Canadians and literally people around the world. Don't muzzle the ox is exactly right. Feed the horse that's hauling the cart. Don't starve the donkey that's bearing the burden. Make sure that we're taking care of our farmers and they'll take care of Canadians. It's time we prioritize these things. The next step that I want to talk about in moving Canada on the pathway forward economically and to a future of prosperity is making sure we deal with those who are in our fuel sectors, our oil and gas sectors. You can't talk those sectors down for 10 years and tell everybody it's dirty oil and dirty gas, and then expect those sectors to continue to be able to produce at a high level when you maintain the policies that have been detrimental to their progress and to their prosperity, such as tanker bans, pipelines bans, such as overtaxation, industrial carbon taxes. And when you put them at a regulatory and taxation disadvantage, guess what? The investment dollars for those sectors are going to flee your country, and it's very hard for a country to move forward on the pathway to prosperity when those who generate our fuel are overcome. Emission caps, production caps, these things are absolutely detrimental to the future prosperity of this country. The next aspect we want to talk about is the forestry sector. The previous Prime Minister, the last Conservative Prime Minister we had, was able to reach a deal that lasted for 10 years in 80 days. It has been over a decade that this government's been in power and still no relief for our forestry sector. And we're seeing mills close all the time here in our country, and people lose good jobs across this nation. It's time we reprioritize, and oh, how Canadians are looking for a government to put a priority on our forestry sector again. And that brings me to a consideration of rural Canadians, who are oftentimes the most overlooked and most often forgotten segment of our nation. Those who live in rural, remote communities are oftentimes forgotten by the government that's in place now, because their way of life is oftentimes not considered when it comes to policies such as EV mandates that take away the choices of the kind of vehicle that they need to drive and want to drive in the areas in which they live. It attacks their way of life and traditions such as hunting and fishing, with over-regulation, especially firearms legislation that punishes the law-abiding firearms owner, hunter, and sports shooter, and misplaces the priorities of rural Canadians and says, oh, no, you know, we're going to tackle crime by doing this. No, rural crime is soaring under their watch because they've neglected the issues that matter most. If you want more security in rural areas, you make sure that those who are law-abiding firearms owners have the ability to protect their homes and stand on guard for their homes and their properties, and to do it properly and lawfully. And as many of them will tell you, firearms ownership is a deterrent to rural crime, and we need to stand up for their rights. The next step I want to talk about, of course, in the pathway forward to prosperity and overcoming the challenges that this budget has presented for Canadians, is to make sure that we are addressing the challenges that we're finding even in the area of rural connectivity and broadband access and mobility access. You see, when budgets are put together, oftentimes there's an urban-centric slant that's put on them, with very little consideration to those who literally grow our food, manufacture our goods, truck and haul our goods, and develop our natural resources. So much of our nation's GDP is harnessed in rural Canada.
And they're an afterthought.
But they're an afterthought when it comes to the policy decisions that this current government is making. They promised for years to increase broadband access and internet access in rural and remote areas, with very little headway being made. I still hear and receive phone calls all the time at our office from those who are frustrated with the lack of coverage. because, again, they've not been proactive in addressing this. We've got to prioritize the needs of rural Canadians because, Madam Speaker, it was rural Canada that built this country, and it will be rural Canada that's key to our comeback. It's time their voices were heard and considered when it comes to aspects of our budget and economic security and viability.
Not treated like second-class citizens.
Exactly. They are not second-class citizens, and they shouldn't be treated that way. They're first-class, hard-working, wonderful people who felt forgotten by their government. But I'm glad to say, Madam Speaker, there is an awakening across rural Canada, and they're recognizing we need change, and they're looking for this side of the House to stand up for them, and we'll continue to.
And I've been very generous with time to the honourable member. Questions and comments. The honourable member for Hamilton. Hamilton West, Ancaster Dot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the member opposite is no Doug Ford with his folksy witticisms, and I'm continuously amazed that the members are conveniently confusing capital investment and operational expenses. Businesses, municipalities, families, and farmers understand this difference, but there's no acknowledgement of the reality of the trade war that we're currently facing with the United States. The whole entire point of this budget is investing in Canada to build our economy, to invest in our country. So can the member opposite explain the difference between a capital investment and an operating expense? Thank you.
The honourable member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Wow. I thank the honourable colleague for his question, but I find it somewhat perplexing, and I think many Canadians share the being compounded by that, or confounded by that, I should say, in that that's a lot like voodoo economics. Spending is spending is spending. To a Canadian, if you're spending, you can call it investment, you can call it this, you can call it that. Spending is spending, and debt is debt, and deficits are deficits. What we need is a government that's going to prioritize the needs of Canadians, unleash our private sector, stop standing on the backs of our industry, stop standing on the backs of our farmers, stop standing on the backs of our oil and gas sector, unleash that potential, build the infrastructure necessary to get Canadian goods to market. Then we'll turn the economy around, and we'll be much more self-reliant in doing so.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for his speech. He talked a lot about the cost of living. This matters to us as well, of course. When it comes to the cost of living, one of the most important aspects of that is the cost of housing. During the election campaign, the government bragged a lot about its Build Canada Homes project. They said that they would fix all of our housing problems, but once again, they have failed. Their budget has been criticized. Apparently, the government has been slow to free up their office spaces. The government will not meet its targets. So is this another broken Liberal promise, or will it be? Thank you.
Merci, Madame Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank my Quebecois colleague. It's a pleasure to discuss matters with her in the House of Commons.
Madam Speaker, that we reflect, and she raises a very valid point. The priority of Canadians is cost of living. And the last thing they need is another grandiose announcement, a big promise that puts expectations high and results never to be seen for years, oftentimes maybe even decades. And it's like, oh, tomorrow, someday tomorrow, we're going to do this. And oh, yeah, we're going to do that somewhere in the future. But I'll tell you what, a promise after a while without delivery leaves people feeling hopeless and desperate. Canadians need results and they need action, not just more spending and not just more announcements. They need real results, not rhetoric. And that's what we need and we intend to do on this side of the House, is deliver results for Canadians.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
No. No.
What? Sorry?
Calgary-McKnight.
Calgary-McKnight.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his wonderful speech. Can I ask my colleague to explain why does this budget not help farmers, builders, and truckers the people who keep Canada running. Thank you.
The honourable member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Thank my honourable colleague from Calgary McKnight, and that's a great question. And they totally have missed the mark when it comes to delivering results for Canadians, because again, they make promises without being grounded in reality and in results and tangible, measurable results for Canadians. You cannot talk down the very sectors that have helped make Canada the greatest, one of the greatest countries, not the greatest country in the world, historically. You can't keep talking down those sectors and then expect all of a sudden to turn it on a dime and say, oh yeah, we're champions for Canada now, come and do business here, but yet we're the highest tax jurisdiction in the advanced economy, and we put more regulations on our energy sector than most other economies, and we put more taxes on them than most other economies, and we're wondering why we're not effective and we're not delivering results. It's because they've misplaced priorities for years and talked down the best of Canadian economy. Let's get out of the way and let Canada do what it does best, produce and work.